In this video, we'll be exploring your scenarios. This will be an ongoing series, so if you have any cool alternate history ideas, post them below. I'll pick a few of my favorites to feature next time. Our first scenario is, what if Zoroastrianism survived as a major religion, suggested by Athenaable4. Zoroastrianism today is a lesser-known Iranian religion, followed by only a few 100,000 people, mostly in Iran as well as India among the Parsis population, descended from Iranian refugees who fled Iran during early Islamic rule. It's an ancient religion. It was one of, if not the first monotheistic religion, where followers believe in only one god. Zoroastrianism also has the concept of a heaven and hell. Many of the core ideas later seen in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam very likely trace their origins back to Zoroastrianism. These concepts were originally passed down orally through early inscriptions by the Magi. And yes, Magi as in the same priestly caste as the three wise men mentioned in the Bible. It was then formalized much later in the Avesta, the Zoroastrian holy book. Zoroastrianism became a major world religion and the dominant faith of the various Persian empires throughout history, until the Arab conquests in the 600s brought Islam, after which Zoroastrianism declined over the course of centuries. For this to happen, the early Islamic conquests of Iran would have to fail. This is plausible. The reason these early Islamic conquests were so successful under the early caliphates was that the Roman-Sasanian War of 602 to 624, also known as the Last Great War of Antiquity, had just completely devastated the Eastern Roman Empire in Iran. In this scenario, this war just does not happen. Islam still spread throughout Arabia, and the early caliphates successfully conquer much of the Middle East. But Eastern Rome and Iran, not weakened from a decades-long conflict, both successfully retreat to the Anatolian and Zagros mountains. This completely alters the history of Iran as a civilization and the spread of Islam, and a lot of history mirrors our own. There is the arrival of the Turks, Mongols. Iran evolves with time. There are dynastic changes, but we are left with a modern world that is very different when it comes to religion. Zoroastrianism would have spread beyond Iran into Central Asia, as other Iranic groups as well as the Turks likely adopted, making Iran the leader of a broader cultural sphere in Zoroastrian world. Turkey would of course look very different as a result, assuming some form of it still develops in Anatolia. It's possible that without the pull of the Islamic world, it retains more of its Roman heritage. Scholars might see it as more of a new Roman dynasty. India and Pakistan developing exactly like in real life is very unlikely. The butterfly effect would run amok. Maybe other colonial empires than the British managed to get more influence. It's pure guesswork, but somewhat mirroring Pakistan, predominantly Zoroastrian states are likely to form in the Indus River region. This world wouldn't be better or worse, just different. I've got some big news for everyone who enjoys my content and map making. The official Neatling maps used in my videos are now available for purchase through the new Cartographer membership tier. If you sign up, you'll get access to a folder with my maps in full resolution. You can even join, download everything, and cancel after a week if you just want the one-time purchase. But if you stick around, I'll keep updating my maps and adding new ones over time, like my recent maps of a habitable Mars. Cartographer members, of course, also get all the supporter and patron-level perks, like early access to videos, mentions at the end of videos, and updates on my upcoming projects. Making a small channel like this one sustainable as a job is honestly very tough, especially when we don't have a sponsor. So if you have the means and want more content like this, please consider joining. Any support really makes a difference. Next suggestion is, what if the North Sea Empire survived, suggested by Start Italiano 3366. Medieval England had a long history of Scandinavian rule, dating back to the 800s when Danish Vikings carved out the Danelaw. Danes and other Norse settlers established communities that remained for centuries and lived alongside the English in relative peace. But Viking raids by Scandinavians continued, even after they established kingdoms. King Ethelred, already insecure on his throne, got a little paranoid about these Danish settlers. He worried they might revolt from within, or side with invading forces. True or not, he decided to order the elimination of all Danes in England. In practice, it was probably just a targeted purge of Danish royals. Then responded with a massive invasion. Within a few years, he overthrew Ethelred, establishing what historians have dubbed the North Sea Empire, a union of England, Denmark, and Norway. The empire would survive almost 3 decades, reaching its height under the rule of his son, Cnut the Great, before declining under Cnut's son, Harthacnut. Norway was never fully loyal to Danish rule. Exiled kings would often return to push the Danes out, only for the Danes to come back again. This back and forth left Harthacnut stuck in Denmark, preparing for a Norwegian invasion. He managed to hold Denmark, but Norway remained a separate kingdom. Meanwhile, the English nobles and Harthacnut's brother, Harold Harefoot, took the opportunity to seize the English throne. Harold died in 1040, and Harthacnut sailed to England, briefly reuniting the crowns of Denmark and England. But he died without an heir in 1042. With his death, the North Sea Empire came to an end as the English and Danish nobles picked new kings. But what if this relatively short-lived Anglo-Scandinavian political entity had somehow survived and left more of a lasting impact? If Cnut wanted a lasting empire, he would have to turn his loose personal union into a stable political system. Say he establishes a new royal seat in York, in England but close to Denmark and Norway, and a council of the three crowns, made up of nobles and bishops from all three kingdoms, giving each realm representation and tying their elites to this shared political structure. He'd have to codify shared succession laws, naming one legitimate heir to all of his kingdoms, with the blessing of the council of the three crowns in York. This would probably only work if England was the seat of power and many English laws and institutions were adopted empire-wide. If everything goes right and his successors are magically competent, we end up with a realm that might very well last a century or two. During this time, more Scandinavian settlers make their way to England. With how similar English and Danish were, especially before the Norman French started to affect the English language, we might see the languages blend together. The Empire of the Three Crowns eventually comes to an end, but England would forever be tied to Scandinavia, culturally and politically. With English history this altered, much of world history is completely rewritten. It might very well still go on to become a global colonial empire, but everything would just be a little off or different. By the modern day, we'd have a very different political entity in Britain, dominated by an English language and culture that is almost Scandinavian. Next scenario is, what if Hale-Bopp's trajectory didn't take it harmlessly through the solar system in 1996 and 1997, but on a collision course with Earth, suggested by Smoltwy. Comet Hale-Bopp, discovered in 1995, was one of the brightest comets in modern history, clearly visible to the naked eye as it flew through the inner solar system in 1996 and 97. If you were alive back then, you've almost certainly heard of it, as it became a cultural phenomenon that fueled conspiracy theories about the end of the world and helped spark Hollywood's late 90s obsession with apocalypse movies. In reality, Hale-Bopp never got very close to Earth, about 1.3 AU. Planets like Mars and Venus frequently pass much closer to Earth than that. But what if it had been on a direct collision course with Earth? Just as in real life, it is discovered independently by Alan Hale and Thomas Bopp on the 23rd of July 1995. This would be big news, but it wouldn't be any different from the real-world discovery at first. That is, until astronomers begin to map out its trajectory. In a matter of weeks, we find out it will be a very close flyby. By October 1995, we know with enough certainty that it is going to collide with a planet on March 22nd, 1997. Let's say it'll hit New Zealand. This probably gives us the best shot because of how remote it is. This discovery just couldn't be kept secret. Thousands of astronomers worldwide are able to do the calculations as well. US President Bill Clinton addresses the nation and the world, explaining the reality of the situation, while reassuring that the US government, in cooperation with most of the world, will now commit all available resources to humanity's survival. This, of course, causes chaos and unrest globally, but not complete collapse. Everyday life still continues in some capacity. World leaders and experts would meet at the UN, consider various options. They would have to decide and commit very quickly, as time is of the essence. There is simply not enough time to stop and deflect it. Even if the entire world dedicated all of their industry to manpower, we could optimistically cobble together hundreds of launches, carrying maybe 1,000 megatons worth of nukes. But to nudge Hale-Bopp enough to miss Earth, we would need thousands of launches, and 40 or 50,000 megatons worth of nukes. Probably more. And even then, we'd still need more time. The only thing we could do is prepare for the inevitable impact. The UN and governments worldwide set in motion their plan to save humanity. Massive bunkers are built across Asia and the Pacific coast of the Americas. Buildings are reinforced in order to withstand the shockwaves, and factories, stadiums, and entire city centers are repurposed to house people, livestock, and even wild animals to help ecosystems recover in the aftermath. The two primary goals in the stable parts of the world is preparing reinforced heated housing for as many as possible for the coming 4 years of permanent winter. This is technically doable. Then on top of that, storing enough food to sustain these people. This is the hard part, as there is only 1.5 years till impact. Strict rations are put in place globally, and most countries implement a draft for who gets to stay in these repurposed refuge city centers. Even with all that, our prospects are very grim. Hale-Bopp is massive. Even conservatively, its impact would release 44 times the energy of the asteroid that killed most of the dinosaurs. That said, 44 times the energy doesn't mean it's 44 times worse. Most of that extra energy is just eaten up by the planet itself, and the radius of the lethal thermal radiation zone and shockwave don't expand linearly. They gradually lose steam as the area covered gets bigger and more energy and heat is absorbed. This wouldn't completely sterilize the planet, but it is very bad, worse than 66 million years ago. By my calculations, based on research on the Chicxulub impact just scaled up, New Zealand is completely erased, melted. Everything within 3,500 kilometers is completely scorched with 0 survivors, and everything within 500-600 kilometers is completely flattened with almost no survivors, as even bunkers are hit with earthquakes so powerful people are rattled around like dice in a cup. as far out as 10,000 kilometers. The entire hemisphere surrounding the impact, windows break, and wooden structures collapse. The opposite half of the world faces 3 to 7 meter tsunamis and is covered in a thin layer of dust. As the dust settles, New Zealand would be at the center of a massive multi-ringed impact crater, around 500 kilometers across, slightly bigger than France and Texas. The area remains volcanically active and prone to earthquakes for decades. Because Hale-Bopp hit New Zealand, the vast majority of the world's human population survives the initial impact, but most perish in the following months and years as the skies darken and a 4-year severe winter begins where no crops can grow. The only ones to survive are those in refuge cities and a handful of the most resourceful preppers and wasteland survivors. As the skies clear after 4 years or so, it is still a grueling 20 years recovery period as temperatures slowly climb back to normal. But I think humanity can make it. This event is very similar to the KT extinction that ended most of the dinosaurs. But the KT extinction did not end all of the dinosaurs. Birds made it, or small rodent-like ancestors made it. Even large animals like crocodilians survived. We are way better suited than them, as we actually know in advance and can prepare, store years worth of food, and save countless species of plants and animals. What comes after is a very different world. By 2017, temperatures have mostly stabilized and people start to resettle the countryside. By 2025, the global population is at 1 billion. Most of the world is agrarians, crop yields are still nowhere near where they used to be, and most technologies are still where they were in 1997. The past decades were focused solely on advancing survival technologies. The world can be split into 3 broad regions. Regions that prepared the best, generally developed countries that had large-scale industry, lots of arable land, and could store the most food prior to impact. They're home to large and more authoritarian-leaning states, as continent-wide cooperation and swift decisions were necessary to survive. The regions where most government structures collapsed during the long winter. The reality that not everyone could be fed would lead to a complete collapse of central governance in large parts of the world. They're a patchwork of old municipal or city governments, warlords, and unorganized groups of survivors. And then the regions that were largely depopulated. In Australia and New Zealand, as a direct result of the impact, but in most cases, like in sub-Saharan Africa, because of already existing food insecurity, paired with political chaos and turmoil, preventing large-scale preparations for the impact. But people do live here, just very few. Old political leaders and elites that had bunkers, and scattered farming communities. This post-apocalyptic world would be forever changed. Civilization would eventually recover, but we would be set back a century, if not more. Life would be harsh. Ecosystems are completely broken and extremely vulnerable as only a few species survived. But that's about all for now. A big thank you to Liam Hale, Senator John, Polanska, Paris Orbet, Willie Kins, Diplobo, Matt Past, Kaios100, Red T, and Max Walker for supporting the channel. And if you also want to be mentioned at the end of videos or get other membership perks like early access to videos and my full resolution maps, consider joining. Making a small channel like this sustainable as a job is honestly very tough, especially when we don't have a sponsor. So if you have the means and want more content like this, please consider joining. Every membership really helps. See you next time.